Egypt, the cradle of civilization, has a rich history dating back to the 14th century BC. It is a country at the northeastern section of Africa, adjacent to Palestine, and through which the Nile flows. In Hebrew, its name is Mizraim, from the kindred root meaning to straighten, press upon, compress, and bind together. Lower Egypt was known as Matsor, a word that speaks to the borders and limits of a strong fortified place. In the Bible, Egypt was known as the land of Ham, named after Ham, the son of Noah, who begat Mizraim, establisher of Egypt, Cush, another name for Ethiopia, who begat Nimrod, the builder of Babylon, Put, used for ancient Libya, and Canaan, progenitor of the Phoenicians. It is well known that Ham is the lineage of the dark-skinned people. Hence, Egypt was named Kemet to the ancients. The word means black and dusty. These had a legacy of astrology, mysticism, and ritual practices of human sacrifice. The Egyptians believed in one creator god called Asur, who is invisible and eternal, and created all existence, walked on earth, suffered a cruel death at the hands of his enemies, rose from the dead, and now sits as god of the dead in the underworld. Most know him as Osiris. However, Egypt was polytheistic. Pre-dynamic Egyptians believed the earth, underworld, air, and sky were people, visible and invisible, that were potentially friendly or unfriendly to man according to the operational task of nature each god was assigned. These gods and goddesses embodied human emotions, desires, and weakness, and could control humankind through magic. Egyptians believed that the world came into existence by a single word and taught that the transfer of power was available from the spirit world to humans through magical arts. Magicians were those who controlled both friendly and hostile powers of the gods as desired. Egyptian magic was influenced by their belief that a person's fate or destiny was decided before birth, yet a sage could tell what the individual's fate was by knowing their date of birth and position of the stars and planets. Ancient Egyptian religious and magical practices have influenced philosophers, people, religions, including Hermetic tradition, the Rosicrucians, Freemasonry, and witchcraft. Trained magicians could restore life to the dead, heal the sick, banish evil spirits, shapeshift at will, and allow doubles or astral bodies to be projected into creatures or inanimate objects. Egyptians believed that these inanimate objects had magical and mystical power, so they crafted things of wood and made statues. The belief that magical power existed in metals and alloys and could be manipulated was called khamia, meaning preparation of the black ore powder. Later Arabs, who were renowned for working with metals in an attempt to transmute them, added the prefix al, making alchemia, or alchemy. They used quicksilver to separate silver and gold from the native ore, resulting in a black residue thought to contain magical powers. The use of this black powder in magical spells was called black magic. In the eyes of God, the land of Egypt was known as a place of bondage, a land with idolatrous inhabitants ruled by a pharaoh. Jeremiah 46:25 says, "The Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, says, Behold, I will punish the multitude of No, and Pharaoh and Egypt with their gods and their kings, even Pharaoh and all them that trust in him." No was the ancient capital of Egypt, whose name means disrupting. Ezekiel 30:15 recounts God saying, "I will pour my fury upon Sin, the strength of Egypt, and cut off the multitude of No." The city of Sin translates to thorn or clay, which is Pelusium in Egypt. Pelusium lays between the seaboard and the marshes of the Nile Delta, about 2.5 miles from the sea. The port was choked by sand as early as the 1st century BC, and since the 3rd century AD was at least 4 miles from the Mediterranean, a feat much further than in ancient times. Ra was seen as the first king of Egypt, and the succeeding pharaohs were the sons of Ra. He represents the power that can be built up in an individual and directed in magic. The word pharaoh means great house, signifying a king in the Coptic Egyptian language. It is written as Puro or Oro. In the ancient Greek language, the prefix oro means eating, and the suffix boros means tail. This corresponds to the Ouroboros, the ancient Egyptian depiction of a serpent or dragon eating its tail. Interestingly, puros is the Greek word for red, used in one context for the red horseman of Revelation, and on the other hand, it is the name for the great seven-crowned serpent. Revelation 12:3 says, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads." Moreover, Ezekiel 29:3 reads, "Speak and say thus, and saith the Lord, Behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh king of Egypt, the great dragon that lies in the midst of his rivers." In this passage, in the books of Genesis, Deuteronomy, Psalms, Job, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, the word dragon is the Hebrew word tannin. It refers to a great sea monster or serpent. In the Ugaritic and Canaanite cosmology, tannin is the servant of Yam, aka the sea, used as a symbol of chaos and evil. In Norse cosmology, he is called Jormungandr, or Midgard, the world serpent, described as so unfathomably large he circles the earth, holding his tail in his mouth. Jormungandr releasing his tail is one of the signs of the beginning of Ragnarok, a great battle that kills numerous Norse mythological figures. Asteroid 471926 Jormungandr was named after it. In Greek mythology, Cetus, the serpentine sea monster, was sent by Poseidon to attack Ethiopia. Other Orphic sea monsters included Ednetha, Hydra, and Scalia. However, it is the biblical account which is the most telling. He is known as Leviathan. In its primitive root, it means to join oneself to, but in Job's recounting, that cleaving is spoken of in a tone of mocking. "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tail with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put a hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Will thou take him for a servant forever? Will thou play with him as with a bird? Or will thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears?" In speaking of his size and power, the chapter continues further. "Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down at even the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? Who has prevented me that I should repay him? Whatsoever under the whole heaven is mine. I will not conceal his parts, nor his power, nor his comely proportion. Who can discover the face of his garment, or who can come to him with his double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. When he raised up himself, the mighty are afraid." One aspect of the multi-headed serpent that's often lost is that some, like the chimera, were fire-breathing. These were said to inhabit the places of Lycia. Job 41:19-21 says, "Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot of cauldron. His breath kindled coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth." But more importantly, Job 41 ends that, "Upon earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. He beholds all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride." Spoken of majestic wild beasts like the Nemean lion. Chimera's offspring is the Sphinx. It is depicted with the head of a human and the body of a lion. Unlike Greek or Levantine Mesopotamian ones, Egyptian sphinxes were not winged. The Sphinx is seen as a benevolent representation of strength and ferocity, usually of a pharaoh. Sphinx is the Greek word meaning to squeeze or tighten up. Although some scholars believe it to be a corruption of the Egyptian name, which means living image, and referred rather to the statue of the Sphinx, which was carved out of quote-unquote living rock. The largest and most famous of these images is the Great Sphinx of Egypt. The Sphinx is said to guard the city of Thebes, whereby a riddle was needed in order to enter. Those who answered incorrectly were strangled and devoured. Sphinx imagery was then adopted into Freemason rituals as a symbol of mystery that only initiates could know. Alpha Phi Alpha worships the Sphinx or Horus. He is the most notable, the god of kingship, healing, protection, the sun, and the sky. He is mostly depicted as a man with a falcon head and is most commonly represented as the son of Osiris and Isis. In the contendings of Horus and Osiris's brother Set, the patron of Upper Egypt, and Horus, the patron of Lower Egypt, were rivals. Set was trying to usurp dominance over Horus, at one point seducing and having sexual intercourse with him. However, Horus places his hand between his thighs and catches Set's semen and throws it into the river. In some accounts, he is able to ejaculate inside him. Nonetheless, this incestuous act of homosexuality was seen as a way of gaining magical power. The Egyptians called Apollo Horus in their own language. Enter Kappa Alpha Psi. According to page 1 of their ritual book, quote, in preparations for all their meetings and in their initiation process, the altar of Kappa Alpha Psi, which is the sacred Delphic shrine, shall be placed in the center of the room and covered with a crimson and cream coverlet. The forename Apollo is Phoebus, meaning bright or pure. He was the ideal Kuros, meaning beardless, athletic, and youthful appearance. Apollo is the most revered of the Greco-Roman gods and known as the masterful magician who could predict prophecy through the Delphic oracle Pythia. Pythia was the high priestess of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. The Temple of Apollo functioned as a pan-Hellenic sanctuary, a neutral place for political meetings. Within the ancient Greek world, Delphi was considered the center of the universe. Several deities and their temples were also there, including the complexes to the Great Mother, Hecate, and Hades. It's claimed that Apollo had affairs with mortals and goddesses, which produce offspring. Among Apollo's most famous children is Asclepius, the god of medicine and healing. He was raised by the centaur Chiron. Iota Phi Theta worships this centaur, aka Sons of Ixus, a creature with an upper body of a human and the lower body of a horse. The Lapithis were an Aeolian tribe said to be kindred of the centaurs. In one myth, the Lapithis and centaurs were twin sons of Apollo. Centaurs were said to live in the mountains of Thessaly. Before the Dark Ages, Thessaly was known as Achalia. In Homer's Odyssey, Achalia was a floating island surrounded by a wall of unbreakable bronze. The plain of Thessaly between Mount Oeta and Mount Olympus was the site of the battle between the Titans and Olympians called Titanomachy. The Olympians, which included Zeus, Poseidon, Hera, Demeter, Aphrodite, Athena, Artemis, Apollo, Ares, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Dionysus, took the victory. The Titans were Oceanus, Sois, Krios, Hyperion, Iaptus, Kronos, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys. Alpha Kappa Alpha worships the goddess Katesh, which was incorporated into Egypt in the late Bronze Age. One spelling for the name Katesh is Kadesh, which is spoken about 18 times in the Bible. Kadesh means holy, a desert in the extreme south of Judah. It is translated from Qades. According to the Hebrew Chaldean lexicon, it is a sodomite, or one who consecrates himself to Astarte or Venus and prostitutes himself in her honor, hence a harlot. In Deuteronomy 23:18, it states, "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore, or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord thy God for any vow, for even both of these are an abomination unto the Lord thy God." According to the author of the Wikipedia article on Katesh, there is no evidence of her being a sacred harlot. Let's look at those claims. Admittedly, her epithets include mistress of all gods, Lady of the Stars of Heaven, and Beloved of Ptah. The word mistress is used in two contexts. The first is the primitive root gabar, meaning to prevail and rule over, i.e., the Lady of Kingdoms. The latter is ba'ala, meaning to be endued by a female owner, the possession of which means having a familiar spirit, making the possessed a sorceress by use of necromancy. Nahum 3:4 says, because of the multitude of whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts that sells nations through whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. Behold, I am against thee, says the Lord of hosts. I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdoms thy shame. The next alias, Lady of the Stars of Heaven, can be understood by the meaning of the stars of heaven. In Genesis 26:4, God promised Abraham he would make his seed multiply as the stars of heaven. A star was spoken of the Messiah, brothers, youth, and numerous progeny. Psalms 147:4 says, he tells the number of stars, he calls them all by their names. And according to Isaiah 13:10, these stars which he refers to as the stars of heaven are those which make up the constellations. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof. The stars that appear at the coming of the sunrise are called morning stars, and these stars are the sons of God. Job 38:7 says, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. According to Revelation 22:16, Jesus, from the root and offspring of David, is the morning star. Numbers 24:7 reiterates this point, stating, I shall see him, but now I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. And his star was explained in Matthew 2:2, which was seen at his birth, stating, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. However, there is one morning star named Lucifer, who the Bible says wanted to be worshipped above all the stars of God and had to be cast down. Isaiah 14:12-14 says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Moreover, the word explains that we bear the tabernacle of the star that we worship. A tabernacle comes from the idea of dwelling or settling down, once of a metaphor used of being familiar with. Amos 5:26 warns the children of Israel, saying, ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and chewing your images, the star of your God, which you made yourselves, and would be destroyed. Moloch, who we often hear about, was the god of the Ammonites and the Phoenicians, to whom the Israelites sacrificed their infants to in the valley of Hinnom. To the Carthaginians, he is represented by the planet Saturn. Chewin means image or pillar, spoken of the statues of Saturn. Wormwood is a star that falls when the third angel sounds his trumpet. It is described as a great star burning like a lamp, which will cause the waters of the rivers and the fountains of the waters to be made bitter, and the bitterness will cause death. The scientific name is Artemisia vulgaris, which in Ukrainian is Chernobyl. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986 resulted in a radioactive fallout, poisoning all those in the area. In the town center of Chernobyl is the Wormwood Star Memorial, which depicts an angel blowing a trumpet in reference to the biblical prophecy. Then there's the epithet, the Beloved of Ptah. Ptah is the Egyptian deity of speech, truth, justice, and architecture. He is the creator god who made the world through speech and known for giving life to all the gods and their cause. Ka is the Egyptian concept of vital essence, which differentiates the living from the dead. The high priest of Ptah were associated with the royal family, even marrying royal blood during the Third Intermediate Period. On September 24, 1960, the Minor Planet Center astronomers discovered a potentially hazardous asteroid of the Apollo group named 5011 Ptah. On the same night, 1913, Anubis, 1923 Osiris, and 1924 Horus were found, all named for ancient Egyptian deities. In Revelation 9, a fifth angel sounds a trumpet, and a star falls from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit. Out of the pit comes locusts, who'd been given the power of scorpions. These had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue, his name is Apollon. Abaddon means destruction, the minister of death, the place of destruction, the abyss. It is a metaphor to a devotee that gives over his life to eternal misery in hell. Some scholars will claim Apollo and Apollyon are not the same, but the Greco-Roman epithets tell something different. Apollo, as the Parnopius, means locust, who was the son of Phocus by Asteria and Estoradia, having the root meaning star. Dating back to the Celtic times, Apollo Ateptomaros was a great horseman, or meaning one that possesses a great horse. Revelation 9:7 says the locusts were shaped like horses. Apollo's appearance is expressed by acersocoms, meaning he who has unshorn hair, and chrysosocoms, literally he who has golden hair. Verse 7 continues that on their heads were crowns like gold, and they had hair as women. Delta Sigma Theta worships Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom, justice, law, victory, and strategic warfare. In the Esoteric religion, she was the daughter of Uni and the sky god Tenea, often depicted as having a lightning bolt. In the 2nd century, she was equated with the Greek goddess Athena, who is often depicted as the owl of Minerva. Other symbols include the serpent of Jupiter. Jupiter was the Roman name, but in the Greek, he's Zeus. The book of Acts explains this. The apostles Paul and Barnabas preached to the synagogue of Jews in Iconium, and both Jews and Greeks believed. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil, affected against the brethren. Iconium, whose name means little image, was the capital of Lycaonia in Asia Minor. Lycaonia itself comes from the root word meaning wolfland, and its primitive root means wolf, a metaphor for cruel, greedy, rapacious, and destructive men. Lycaonia also referred to the strange speech and tongue of its inhabitants, which was undeterminable. It was here Paul and Barnabas preached the gospel and healed a man impotent in his feet from birth. When the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in a speech of Lycaonia, "The gods are come down to us in the likeness of men." And they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius, because he was the chief speaker. Paul and Barnabas rebuked these people. Anubis is worshipped by Omega Psi Phi. Anubis, or Anupu, means to decay. He is the god of funerary rites and the guide to the underworld. He is usually depicted by a man with a canine head. Anubis is associated with Wapwapet, who is called Ra in the pyramid text. Their cult center is Lycopolis, also translated the city of the wolves, in Upper Egypt at Cynopolis, city of the dog. Exodus 11:7 says, "Against the children of Israel a dog shall not move his tongue." God put a difference between Israel and Egypt. All throughout the Bible, it is spoken the children of God must separate themselves from these people and their practices, and Israel is often reaching to God to be delivered from their hands. Psalms 22:20 says, "Deliver my soul from the word, my darling from the power of the dog." Philippians 3:2 says, "Beware of the dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the concision." Dog, the word kelep, means attack, of contempt or abasement, a male prostitute, or a pagan sacrifice. It is Zeta Phi Beta who worships Bastet, the Greek equivalent of Artemis. Throughout Egyptian history, she was a lioness warrior goddess of the sun. She's also the goddess of pregnancy and childbirth, depicted as having a head of a cat and the body of a woman. In the Greek, The name is Bubastis, translated from the Hebrew Pibaseth. In Ezekiel 30:17, the young men of Aven and of Pibaseth were judged to fall by the sword and these cities to go into captivity. Aven means vanity and Pibaseth a place of loathing. Aven was also a synonym of On in Egypt. Another name for On is Heliopolis, city of the sun, the center of sun worship. The representation of their solar deity is a sacred serpent, the Olf. Serpents are said to be native of Egypt, and their inhabitants were well-known astronomers and astrologers, adept in the practice of ophiomancy, divination by serpent. Sigma Gamma Rho worships Mot, believed to rule over concepts of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. Mot regulates the divine order of all things and cycles of the sun, moon, stars, and seasons, or time itself. Therefore, social order, kinships, and the harmony of the universe can be preserved by practicing the principles of Mot. These are called the 42 Laws of Mot, also known as the Negative Confessions or the Declaration of Innocence. The first law is, I have not committed sin, which encompasses the overall purpose of the confessions, to deny all wrongdoing. Even Law 8 says to confess, I have not told lies. This wholly goes against God's word, which says every man is a liar and all have sinned. Her primary role, however, is weighing the heart at Duat. It was her feather which determined whether souls could reach paradise. Then there's Phi Beta Sigma, which of all the sororities and fraternities is the only one to admit to being a spiritual organization. When candidates for admission are brought in, they are told the traditional story of the original Greek traveler of their fraternity, which is as follows. A man was led by the gods to a place called Death Valley to observe the bones of the unfit that did not know the meaning of brotherhood. He is later taken to the foothills of Mount Olympus, where the greater gods were supposed to live under the ruler Zeus. It was in these mountains that our founding brothers became Greek, because they went before you and because you have exemplified the ideals of brotherhood, scholarship, and service. You are now also part Greek. The process of becoming Greek is occurring even as you stand before me. End quote. That is, of course, the process for all initiates of the Divine Nine organizations. All these have their own altars, usually set near a grove, a set of sacred trees or poles. A grove is named for Ashera, the goddess of happiness and fortune, and consort of Baal.